So to keep us from falling apart, we'll write songs in the dark, and to stop us from fading away, we'll ride for a better day.
Welcome to the Inside the Boards podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you learn to think like a question writer, so you can study smarter, not harder, and succeed in medical school. And now here's your host, Patrick Beeman.
Hello, Boards Insiders. I am Patrick Beeman, the usual host of this podcast. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to provide a little bit of advice for those who are just getting their feet wet on the wards. So, little anecdote. So the other day, I do this delivery. It's at a hospital that I don't go to that much. I'm an OB laborist, and I do this delivery, which ends up being really, really complicated, very difficult, but, you know, the kind of thing that after it made me think, I still got it. At the end, as I usually do after the delivery, I ended up taking the drape that we place under patients, cleaning it up, putting it in the trash, and then ensuring that the needles are off the table. And after that, the nurses commented, "Oh, wow, Annie cleans up his own stuff. I've never had a doctor do that," which really surprises me. I mean, like, in what other sector can you, like, go in, make the bloodiest mess possible, absolute scene of carnage, and then just peace out and let other people pick your shit up? Like, that's not legit. It takes me an extra 30 seconds or a minute to help the nurses with these, you know, cleanup process or whatever. The advice you often hear is to go the extra mile. Well, in being conscious of what you do on the wards and taking care of other people on the team, respecting them, kind of listening probably to what your parents, you know, taught you as you grew up, like clean up after yourself, that investment of time yields extra mile benefits with only requiring you to essentially take a few extra steps. So I just wanted to offer that because, you know, we think about the things we have to do, and, you know, there's half an hour of charting to do after seeing some complicated patient or doing some complicated procedure, and the orders and the med reconciliation. And you guys will see once you're practicing physicians or residents that the scut work to work that I thought I would be doing, that I want to be doing because I wanted to be a doctor and help people, is like really large. And it's, you know, frustrating to a lot of us. But I mention this because when you take care of your team, you're respectful, the rapport you build will yield you a tenfold return in terms of building your reputation for being a team player. And I'm pretty sure it prevents at least 50% of unnecessary calls, like orders for Tylenol in the middle of the night for a patient who isn't even admitted for something related to pain. I don't know. I was taught this sort of framework and way of acting by one of my mentors, especially when I was an intern and second-year resident. My senior resident, Dr. Nancy Lowe, military physician and attending now. But she always put in that little bit of extra effort, and she was beloved by anyone who worked with her. Other kind of easy things that you can do to build your reputation with other staff in the OR. If you're not too busy, and you can take the extra, probably takes an extra 5 minutes, help move the patient from the operating table to their bed on their way to the PACU. There's another high yield practice that can yield you a lot of results. So stick around at the end for some announcements and an Easter egg. And just before we get into this, I gotta do it. Don't skip ahead. I want to tell you about this week's sponsor. Our sponsor this week is Muse. You can find them at bit.ly/ITBMuse. Use that link. We get a commission It's a research-grade EEG device that kind of looks like headphones, senses your brain activity, and translates those signals into guiding sounds to get you back to a state of peace. Check it out using the link bit.ly/ITBMuse to learn more and to help support ITB. And here is an example from our all-audio Qbank. This is the Step 1 version powered by Exam Circle and Lecturio. You can download the iOS beta app and subscribe to our all-audio Qbank by just searching Apple's App Store for Inside the Boards, all one word, and go to our website and sign up to become a Boards Insider, and we will notify you just as soon as we release the full version of our app, which will be for both Android and Apple devices.
A 6-year-old boy presents to the emergency room with passage of watery stools. The diarrhea started 11 hours ago after he left a birthday party where he ate from platters of fruits, vegetables, and meats. Other kids at the party are experiencing similar symptoms. The boy is not vomited. What is the best diagnostic method to identify the organism responsible for this patient's symptoms? Is it A, stool culture with the use of sorbitol McConkey agar? B, stool culture in special salt-containing media? C, stool test for C. difficile toxin? Or is it D, stool culture for C. perfringens? The correct answer is D, stool culture for C. perfringens. Clostridium perfringens enteric infection causes a watery diarrhea 8 to 14 hours after ingestion of the infectious food source, which is usually contaminated meat or vegetables.
So there's a little example from the all-audio Qbank. I just want to keep reiterating, once we get this other app out, it's going to be hella awesome. Much better production value, a greater number of questions, and a bunch of features that you've come to expect from looking at Qbanks and using Qbanks throughout your studying. Here is today's interview with Dr. Greg Rodden, host of our Physiology by Physeo podcast. Back to the meat of today's episode.
Okay, so today we have a special treat for you guys. We have the creators of Physeo, which is this fantastic platform. I'm going to let them tell you about it, but it's basically like the Pathoma for physiology. They might not use the same words, but that's how I'm going to describe it. So welcome to Inside the Boards, Rhett and Michael.
Thanks. Yeah, we're really excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Greg.
Yeah, so this isn't your first appearance on Inside the Boards, right?
Yeah, that's right. It was a while ago. What was it, like 2 years ago, Rhett, when he came on?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're like veterans in our eyes, and we're happy to have them back because they just keep delivering. Like in these past 2 years, they have been super busy producing more and more high yield content for their audiences, and they just told me that they moved into a new office. So clearly, their company is growing, and they're doing a great job.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time for us. Lots of new stuff in the works, which we'll probably get into. So we're excited.
Sweet. All right, cool. So first off, you're back in the med school interview room. So tell me about yourselves.
So I'm Rhett, and I grew up in Utah, and me and Michael met in undergrad, and so that's kind of where we started our getting to know each other and studying and stuff like that.
So same for me, from Utah, and we both went to Utah Valley University. So that's kind of where we rub shoulders, and then we both got into the University of Utah School of Medicine, which was surprising for us because it's the state school, and everyone says it's really competitive. So we were both pleasantly surprised when we both got in, and naturally just kind of gravitated towards each other and worked together throughout the first 2 years of med school. So that's kind of the beginnings of our relationship, I guess.
Yeah, and what's funny is I knew Michael's sister first, and I didn't know that they were related at all because I was actually doing sign language. That was my major in undergrad. And so I ended up making this connection that this girl in my class that I would do sign language with, had a brother, and then later I got to know Michael really well from our pre-med courses, and then studied for the MCAT with him, and me and Michael just align on so many things. And
don't bring up those memories, Rhett.
Yeah, the PTSD of MCAT, and so now me and Michael, we studied together for like the first couple of years of med school, and from there, ended up starting physio and all this stuff.
Yeah. So like a dynamic duo with strong and long roots going back together. So that's great. So did you both grow up in Utah?
Yeah. I grew up in a city called Riverton. It's about 30 minutes south of Salt Lake City, and actually live there with my family now. So I'm married. I have 2 kids. 4-year-old, he'll be 5 in August, and then I have a 2.5-year-old named Oliver. He'll be 3 in December, and then my wife is expecting here in a couple weeks, actually. So July 7th, she's going to get induced if the baby doesn't come before then. So little girl, we're excited.
Well, congratulations, man. That's fantastic. And any kids on the other side of this equation?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So I have 3 kids. I got a 5-year-old named Cyrus, and then a 4-year-old named Marilyn Akiko. We just call her Kiko, and that's her name for all intents and purposes. It's Japanese. So, well, Akiko is Japanese. Kiko is an Americanized. I guess we've shortened it to that. Then we've got this little shockingly redheaded baby that's about to turn a year old. And I say shockingly because where in the world did the red hair come from? I have no idea. My wife's got Japanese background. I don't have any red in my hair or my family. But I'm fairly confident it's my child. But she looks and acts too much like me to not be mine. So, but yeah. And then in fact, my 4-year-old is turning 4 today. So we got a birthday party later in this afternoon. She's excited.
Awesome. All right. So lots of good stuff to look forward to for you guys. All right. So I guess let's talk about, your amazing platform. I mean, tell me, how did Physeo first come about? Like, and you guys have kids, like how in the world were you doing med school and starting a company and being good parents at the same time?
It's definitely a balance act. I'll say that much. And we have awesome wives that really support us. So that's really helpful.
I'd say tolerate our adventures.
Yeah, that's probably more accurate, right? Yeah, but let's dive into maybe the second year of med school. That's kind of where it all began. So I guess, back during the time when Rhett and I were studying for Step 1, there really wasn't a lot of content in terms of videos at the time. Looking back, I recall using Pathoma, and that was kind of like the one video platform that was pretty accessible, relatively cheap, and a lot of people were using. It was really good. Aside from that, there really wasn't a lot that I can recall. I know there was DIT, but that was more like a dedicated Step 1 video resource, and it was a little more expensive, so it was kind of harder to access, I guess. We used Pathoma and loved it, and we thought, wow, it would be amazing if there were other video resources like this that could teach us other difficult concepts. And we felt that physiology was one of the most fundamental and difficult concepts. It really forms a basis for a lot of other topics. If you understand physiology really well, then it's a lot easier to understand, for example, pathology and pharmacology and other topics that can be really challenging. And so I guess once we took Step 1 and kind of reflecting back, that idea just kind of grew on us over time. And let's see, we started our 3rd year in June after we had taken Step 1, and we were both on our family medicine rotation, and we were only like a week or so in when we started having serious conversations about potentially creating a video platform for physiology. At first it was kind of just like, oh, that'd be cool, that's like a fun idea to think about. I was watching Pathoma, and I kind of shared that idea with Rhett, like, it'd be sweet if there was this for physiology. Rhett kind of thought about that more and then had his own little take on what happened after that.
Yeah. So 2 things happened. I've got a brother-in-law named Steve, and he's the guy that you contact if you're like on our site and it says contact Steve. He's the one that you contact. And then then my brother Zach. I had a conversation with each of them independently during like the first week of my family medicine rotation, and just in passing, explain this idea of how cool it would be if there was a video resource like the one Michael described, like one that covered physiology in the way that Pathoma covered pathology. And those conversations were just instrumental in actually making this idea become real in my mind, because Steve, just really excited and tenacious, wanting to get his hands into something that's really hard to build and just starting a company. And then I was at a steakhouse with my brother Zach and his family, and I told him this idea, and he's really excited. He's got a lot of experience in business and video production. And so after those two conversations, we just like kept talking about it between the three of us and seeing how real it could become. And then once we realized that it could become an actual viable company and we could do this, then, we started talking to Michael, and so the four of us ended up just realizing that we can and should do this and take the risk. And at this point, I just thought it was unthinkable to take any time away from medical school for any reason, even a reason like this, because I was just so focused on wanting to get into ENT, like this is what I want to do. And I just couldn't picture like pausing that path for any reason. It just felt like the right thing to do. So we ended up taking a year off to do this.
Yeah. So, but you're past a year, right?
Yeah. So we took a year off, and that was like, the physiology aspect of physio. And after that year, we decided to go back and do our third year. So, June of, I guess, 2 years ago, we started our third year of medical school back at the U. And, finished third year. That was an interesting experience, enlightening and fun, and I don't know, educational, hard, all sorts of emotions during that year. And then after that, we kind of started, I guess it was probably like the middle of third year, we started seriously thinking about, growing physio into something more than just physiology. We got a lot of users who just love the content and were asking us about other things, for example, like biochemistry and immunology and that kind of stuff that, is probably pretty easily understood through conceptual videos as well. That idea kind of evolved over the, mid third year to the end of our third year. And we thought, well, why don't we do it again? So we decided to take some more time off. And for the past year, we have been just hard at work creating a lot of content. And we're actually going to take one more year off. So, it's the end of June right now. And so June next year, we'll be going back to finish our fourth year of medical school.
Okay. Gotcha. So, wow. Like you guys, it seems like you must have been like in the perfect place at the perfect time, to be able to do something like this, so your school was completely fine with you guys just kind of intermittently going through your clinical years, like 1 year off, then do a clinical year, another year off, then do a clinical year.
Yeah, it's been interesting. The University of Utah has been very supportive overall. I think when we first approached the dean, he was like at first a little hesitant probably, but then he quickly realized how far we were in our thought process and, the steps we had taken. We had already formed this amazing team and we had met with an investor, and, we were pretty far into the process, the first time. And so he realized like, oh, wow, you guys are actually like, you've already gotten the ball rolling on this thing. And so I think with that perspective, he was more comfortable allowing us to take some time off. And then since then, it's just, it's been relatively successful. And so I think the success that we've had and just the impact that we've been able to have on the medical community has probably been somewhat reassuring to the medical school, and probably the reason why they've allowed us to continue to take some more time off.
Right. Absolutely. So was there like any specific moment at the start of what was then your third year, which you then took off? Was there any specific moment where you guys were like, this is happening? Like, was there some comment from a family member or some like light bulb moment that, really made you think, okay, we can actually do this. Like, this isn't just a flight of fancy kind of thing.
I think for me, it was when Rhett called me one day with Steve and Zach on the line. They were having a 3-way conversation, and they were having, a very serious conversation. Like, we're going to do this. Do you want to come along and do it with us? I was kind of like shocked. I had never really thought seriously about doing it. I guess when I had made comments to Rhett, it was more of like, oh, this would be cool if it existed, but not like, oh, we should go do this, But when they were all, talking together and made it sound like, it was a reality, like we could do it, and they had some of the skill set that we lacked. I think for me, that was probably the first time where I thought seriously, like, okay, like I need to seriously consider this. This could happen.
Yeah, and for me, it was the conversation of realizing that it could be possible after my conversations with Steve and Zach, and then in particular, a conversation with my brother Zach that it should be something that I do. I remember because he's older than me by about 8 years, and he's got a lot of experience, but even with the age difference, we've been really close. I come from a family of 4 boys, and we're all like super close, super tight, and anyways, I remember Zach saying, we're in the parking lot for probably an hour outside the steakhouse, and he's like, look, this has the potential to be something awesome. Like I recognize that you are in med school and you've got this course, and this looks like an extreme deviation from that, but just think about if you can actually make this happen, because it might be one of those once in a lifetime opportunities, which it totally was. The stars totally aligned with just what our team, everything just came together in the smoothest way possible. It just made me like think, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And if it doesn't actually sacrifice my medical career, if I can get the dean to let me take some time off and return and pursue my career, which at the time I wanted to pursue, like I said, ear, nose, and throat, then maybe this is a good idea. So it was kind of that moment and ruminating on Zach's comments that made me think, I should probably do this.
That's fantastic. And, as you were talking there, it reminded me of kind of a broader theme that we love to harp on here at Inside the Boards, which is it's important to have outside influences in your life. Like when you're in the med school life, especially in the first 2 years, you can get so locked in. And if you don't have anyone outside of that environment, it becomes very hard to think outside of that, sorry for the cliche, but outside of that box. And for you, it was a family member telling you, like, you've struck gold here. You really need to think about this. And just that kind of woke you up to outside possibilities, and then woke you up to a fantastic opportunity. And unfortunately, a lot of medical students like to kind of stick to the well-known path. A lot of physicians tend to be more conservative-minded and aren't willing to take those risks. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that, but certainly when we see physicians who also have kind of like a entrepreneurial mindset and are able to take those risks and are willing to step outside of that line, we really appreciate it, because one, we know how hard that is. Coming from the environment where you just want to cram through your 4 years of medical school and be done. But two, like how hard it is to mentally say to yourself, you know what, these limiting beliefs that I had before about what's accessible to me and what's possible for me, those are just things that I'm imposing upon myself. Like, if I really want to do this, I can do this. And so I love, like, I'm very inspired by that story that you guys had, not just because, you're these two fantastic and creative guys, but also because you brought your family into it, and they were the ones who kind of helped you to take that step.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I like, I really like what you said there, because I think that having your family and just outside connections and helping you get outside that box, I think is so helpful and refreshing to recognize, I guess more than anything, just getting that input from people that are outside med student life. You get so stuck in that. And I think that's it's great to be surrounded by focused people when you're trying to study, for sure. But it is so beneficial also to see other people, that doctors or people in medicine that kind of take that entrepreneurial spirit. Me, Michael, and Steve and Zach, even now, just especially recently, just talked about how much respect we have for Patrick Beeman. Obviously, Patrick, Greg. Looking at his life, he's got, he's an OBGYN and got a wife in the medical field as well, and kids, and then built this really amazing podcast and give this service to medical students, and I just think about that, like the sacrifice that it would take to build something like that while you're working as a clinician and taking care of patients and everything. And so, I totally agree with what you're saying there.
Cool. So you guys start this show, or start this brand new platform, and it starts out and it's just these, cool little Pathoma style videos that help to explain conceptual topics in physiology. And then you start to gain a little bit of momentum, and students are telling you, like, listen, we really like what you're doing here. Can you do this for other things? So you've started with biochemistry. And what other services have you guys kind of branched out to?
Yeah. So as of last year, I guess around this time, August of 2018, we only had physiology. And so now it's, May 2019 or June 2019. And since then, we have added biostatistics, like the epidemiology, biostats type stuff that you need to know for step 1. We've added biochemistry. We kind of had this idea that, it'd be really awesome if we could make all of our content useful and not just some of it. Because, when you think about step 1, there really are a lot of conceptual things, but there are also things that are really difficult that you just have to memorize. There are certain aspects of lysosomal storage diseases or, brain tumors or drugs that you can't really understand some of these things from a conceptual standpoint that will make it easier to memorize. And so unfortunately, you just have to kind of memorize some things for step 1. And with that in mind, we decided to create some image mnemonics. And so, our biochemistry section is really awesome because it was the first time we kind of had that idea and decided to take that approach. And so it's a hybridization of, everything you need to know conceptually. And then we have, 40 image mnemonics or something for most of the things that are most challenging to memorize for biochemistry. And so that's kind of our game plan going forward. And we've added the biochemistry, we've added anatomy. We've added microbiology with tons of image mnemonics, and there are also some conceptual lectures. And so it's a great hybridization of, the conceptual and the memorization aspect of step 1.
Yeah. So I apologize that I haven't checked out all of your videos yet, but so I did look at one of your microbiology videos, and it really, and don't take this the wrong way, it really reminded me of the sketchy style. Immediately when I saw it, I was like, oh wow, this is so similar to sketchy, but then it's housed within a broader network of step 1 study resources. So were you guys going for the sketchy style when you did the microbiology, and is it kind of the same with your biochem stuff?
It's a great question. I think we like aspects of sketchy. There are a lot of things that I think sketchy does very well. The story around the image, I think, was the main thing that we were trying to replicate. I think sketchy does that really well. On top of that, we were really trying to hybridize the information that you need to understand conceptually. So for example, for Staph aureus, you have to know that it's a gram-positive organism, and you have to know what it looks like under a microscope. And so we show a picture of the gram stain, and then, you have to know what mannitol fermentation looks like, what, all these different lab tests. There are so many lab tests and clinical correlates that are associated with microbiology. And, sketchy doesn't really doesn't touch on that. And so I guess our objective with the micro was to have that awesome image mnemonic that's story-based, and then bring together all of these clinical pictures, the lab tests, and all of the other stuff that you need to know for step 1. And then to top it off, we kind of review with a question at the end of our videos.
Going back to this idea of really trying to put everything in the framework of all that you need to know for step 1, and putting ourselves in the shoes of med students who are really trying to dominate this exam, we want to make sure that they have that proper like mind palettes, a proper framework of where to put things in their mind. And when we can bring in those clinical correlations, then it really helps solidify all of those things. And it's stuff they just need to know anyways. So it just makes sense to hybridize that information. And with that in mind, we also created a series of videos for general principles. We call it Microbiology Fundamentals. It's a series of 9 videos that just goes over those fundamental principles of bacteria and fungi and viruses, and that stuff that really can help prime students for like getting ready to memorize stuff, like help them understand the conceptual position of microbiology, and which, by the way, is really high yield for step 1. That stuff in and of itself, especially in recent years. So not only does it like help in that way, but it also helps prepare students to memorize like the 140 videos that we've got for all of the organisms.
Yeah, absolutely. And like just speaking on a granular level regarding that topic, I definitely found that without having that initial framework of the general principles of microbiology and like why we classify things into gram positive versus gram negative, and kind of working down those microbial classification trees, and like the way that those are used clinically to distinguish organisms, and then we are able to tailor our treatment based on the lab tests that are run by the pathologist. Like if you don't have that conceptual framework, it just makes the memorization that much harder. And, that's the last thing that people want. So yeah, I mean, I think it's critical. It's mission critical for you to include that information, and like not talking bad about Sketchy or anything, but like they didn't have that information, at least when I went through it. So I'm glad that you guys had the foresight to include that. So good on you. So we talked about kind of some of the strengths of your platform as far as providing both conceptual and kind of brute force memorization tools to maximize students' learning and performance. So where do you guys think you can improve, and what's kind of next on the horizon for you?
All right, that's all we have for today. Thank you for listening. As always, I deeply, deeply appreciate it. I actually listened and did the editing for this episode myself. And hey, thanks to the guys at Physeo and Greg for the kind words about me. Yeah, it is kind of, complex and difficult to do all of these things that I do. I say this a lot. I hope it doesn't sound like complaining. I'm trying to be real, but I am a full-time OB hospitalist, and I do Inside the Boards pretty much also full-time, and I work very cheaply for the company, i.e. free, because we're trying to get it to grow, and we need your help with that. As you can imagine, it does take a little bit to keep growing and doing the sorts of things we want to do to create the best free audio resource for med school and board prep. You guys can help by telling your friends about our platform and podcasts, support our sponsors, share us on social media, hitting subscribe, and leave a rating and review on whatever podcatcher you find and listen to Inside the Boards. But I will say this, which, please join in my happiness. My wife is finishing her residency at the end of September. She's off cycle because of our baby's birth and whatnot, but she'll actually have a job as an attending too, which I am hoping will ease the burden on me a little bit. as it were. So I'm going to plan to devote a lot more time to ITB in the coming months. Well, that and do more things for my kids in terms of their schools, because I have 4, and the 3 oldest are enrolled in a new school system this year, and it's 3 separate schools. So their mom is going to need some help with coordinating all of that. And my daughter is in high school. It's absolutely crazy. I cannot believe how quickly time goes. So essentially, I kind of have a sugar mama now, as they say. And hopefully that benefits not only me and the son that we have together, but also my other 3 kids and their mom, as well as you guys and Inside the Boards. So thanks for the kind words, gentlemen. Join us next time to hear what Physio has planned for the future.
What does the radiation do to them, precisely?
At the level some of them were exposed, ionizing radiation tears the cellular structure apart. The skin blisters, turns red and black. This is followed by a latency period. The immediate effects subside. The patient appears to be recovering, healthy even, but they aren't.
Are you not entertained? I am. If you haven't seen the HBO series Chernobyl, we're doing a series of episodes covering the medicine of Chernobyl and radiation poisoning and radiation oncology as a specialty itself. So please tell your friends. By the way, that's Enter Shikari, Rao Reynolds and the guys from Enter Shikari. Thanks for letting us use an excerpt from Radiate, right? A kind of perfect song for the subject we'll be dealing with related to the Chernobyl series of episodes. And not only because we probably can't secure rights to use Imagine Dragons' Radioactive. I absolutely love Enter Shikari. You can find them wherever you listen to music, and they just dropped a new single called Stop the Clocks, and it's pretty good. You should check it out.